Hello, and welcome to TABLEWORK, a tax video series featuring members of our show's creative teams in a roundtable discussion of their scholarly and creative efforts for taking their production from the page or studio to the stage. The phrase table work is a performing arts term for the early rehearsal period, focusing on the script or, in our case, the choreography, source material, and analysis. Today's panelists will help us dive into top spring main stage production, SPLICE, 5 dance films. We'll do a round of introductions before diving into our first question. My name is Alita Hayes, and the name of my piece is Riot of Spring.
My name is Katie Faulkner, and the name of my piece is Pent.
My name is Diane Frank, and the name of my dance is Trace Lines in the Provisional.
Hi, my name is Becky Badertha, and I'm the costume designer for these 3 pieces.
So, what is the main theme that your piece explores? We'll start with Katie.
Yeah, so the piece that I've been working on, it's aiming less to explore a theme and more to explore a feeling or a feeling state, particularly the colliding states of being that I have certainly felt over the course of this past year, and I think many members of my cast and maybe others have felt, is this phenomenon of having maybe more energy or more going on than one has the room to express within the context of their relatively confined or isolated life this past year. So it is in some ways about this bottlenecked energy that I have been feeling, but it's also about this dormant state of vitality and humor and aliveness that I think is just waiting to be born when COVID is finally waning. What about you, Diane?
Well, like you, I'm not so much trying to portray something that is thematic as to explore something that is somatic and kinetic about what this pandemic moment has been, the extended pandemic moment has been, and trying to find a way to make sense of that, and also trying to use that as a point of investigation. I found myself asking what was most important about dancing for me, and that is something about connection, actual physical connection to other people. And, of course, that has been thwarted in this moment and postponed. And I have felt that the work kind of rises from the question of how do you embody that? How do you make that happen when the pathways for that to happen have been so circumscribed? And so that's how, that's the kind of point of departure for the work. I find the spirit of people is larger than the constraints of the moment, and that's what I'm getting at in the work, I hope. Thanks. And how about you, Alita?
I was looking at rituals at the very beginning and just thinking about how do you create a rite? And I was even looking at animal rights, how animals do rights in nature. And then I was thinking about what kind of structure that could I lay down that would lead to a kind of an opening or a blossoming or at the very end, which all of us are dying to be out of this moment and into something else. So I was thinking about like seeding and budding and blossoming and the idea of renewal and reset and refresh. And then I also looked at a lot of and was inspired by a lot of choreographers at some point seemed to do a rite of spring based on the 1913 Nijinsky. So, of course, we weren't trying to redo that, but I was inspired by that. And I've seen a lot of different versions of it, and I shared that with my cast. And the thing that excited me most about one of the things that excited me the most is not only the collaboration in that piece, but how it caused a riot at the very end, during the premiere. And I just thought, wow, we are in a game-changing, disruptive moment. And it just was inspiring to me that there is something that we could do that would be disruptive, of course, not necessarily on the scale of the 1913 version, but maybe it's already being done for us in the time that we're living in. And for us to get a sense of that kind of explosion or disruption or of expression. Thank you.
What do you all find is the most interesting dance styles that you're using in this piece? And we'll go to Diane first.
Okay. Well, it's not so much a style as a kind of decision around certain ideas about compression or pushing against an obstacle or pushing against an edge and a surface and finding out what's possible within that. And then I have to say that the issue for me that's been biggest is to try to blend the two forms of dance in the physical sense and what it is to construct a piece in that and or movement material in that, and then what it is to deal with film, which is an entirely different kind of element. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to explore is how do you make a connection when you aren't allowed to be physically present, close to someone else, doing, partnering where you're, supporting each other, leaning on each other, stretching, all of that. So, but it is possible, to go to film and build an image out of that is layered, has more than one person in it. There's, it can achieve a different kind of reality. And so I'm toggling between the opportunities of those two forms, trying to find a way to take advantage of what each of them offers, and build a thing from that will ultimately be a film, not a live performance. Yeah. And how about you, Katie?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking as much about style for this particular piece. I made the decision fairly early on because of the fact that we were working over Zoom, not to generate any of the movement vocabulary from my own body. And so I've been working very collaboratively with the students, having them generate a lot of the material that feels pertinent and relevant to them, but also doing so in a way, I established some pretty tight formal constraints early on, in part because we were working within such a expedited process. And so I'm having them work within very architecturally specific conceits that have, forced a certain kind of problem solving, for each of them. And I did that in part because I like it and in part because it was a way that I could imagine being really expedient. So they all come from different movement backgrounds. They all have different styles in their bodies and in their beings. And so the work that has emerged or the material that has emerged feels like maybe it transcends style a little bit, or at least I hope it does. Alida?
I would say that my answer is very similar to yours. I developed or used a structural constraint and prompts that asked people to come up with movement themselves. I'm not interested in style, but I'm interested in different expressions rubbing up against one another. I would say that the constraints helped everybody to, in a way, both be on the same page and yet do something that came from their own body. So one of the goals that I had for all of us is that we see movement in one another that we've never seen before, and maybe that I haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. If we could address maybe what some of the concerns we've had about film, working in a medium that, ultimately a form that we don't usually work in, and what its opportunities are, what its constraints have been, and how we've been addressing that in rehearsal. Anybody thoughts? Katie?
Right. Well, there is the challenge of working within a medium that I have very little experience with, working for dance film, dance for the camera. There's that challenge, but then there's also the challenge of directing it entirely through Zoom and monster spreadsheets. And there's also the challenge of working within an extremely rapid timeline. I'm someone who typically works on projects for a really, really long time. So having essentially 4 weeks to make everything, 1 week to shoot everything, and 2 weeks to edit everything has been actually really exciting, really hard, but really exciting. It's made me feel incredibly alert, which is nice. It's kind of waking me up out of the dormancy I've felt in some ways this year. Yeah. What about you, Alita?
Of course, I also have no technological know-how around filmmaking. And in fact, it surprised me how layered and how the complication is in the form. My biggest fear is that it would be flat. And it is flat. It is two-dimensional. So I was very interested in how to make something appear live. And early on, I put forward to the dancer that we were going to create the visceral and the virtual. I would say the other difficulty was getting, if you have, you're creating something on Zoom, not just the latency, but how do you get people to connect to one another? And it's something that we really take it for granted, how dancers or bodies in a room can connect and pick up on one another. And it's a completely different game on Zoom. So that was a real challenge. And then I would see the opportunity has been, I didn't realize until now how interested I am in frames and framing, and having grown up doing ballet and that proscenium box. And I've spent a lot of time in the last few years getting away from that, but it reintroduced me back to this whole idea of a frame and what do you do within a frame. So that's been a very exciting process for me. And this idea of how do you direct the eye, the audience's eye, it's much more specific in film. So I feel like there's a lot of opportunities there. And then the other thing that was exciting to me is intimacy. And I'm even wondering when I go back to making live performance, how I can direct the eye more and create more of that intimate, or where you can see something very close up. Or so those are the things that have been interesting to me in this process.
Mm-hmm. And I just go last here. I've been lucky enough to have the delay of the start of this work was the beginning of the spring quarter, and because of the luck of the draw, I guess, my cast turns out to be all located on campus, and one thing we have been able to do is to film outside at a distance, but it does give the opportunity to have a kind of architecture to the the things that we filmed. And I would just say that, as I guess both Katie and Alita were saying, the frame of the shot is quite, the frame of the, the eye of the lens is really, really different from the eye of live performance. And I'm kind of fascinated with the degree of intimacy and compression that is very much a part of the picture.
Yes.
And the dancers are going there. They're really, really great in that way. And although we are at a distance from each other, it's the degree of detail that's possible and how to construct a dance out of that has been really fascinating for me. And again, it's that idea of framing. It's different from the stage, but it's still the idea of how to, locate that action, that telling poetic action, and figuring out how to use that. I'm sort of, it's an artistic aesthetic process, and it's very felt, and it's very much informed by the strengths of my filmmaker and editor and what it is that she's been able to capture. And that conversation, that, work process has been really, really enlivening, both for the dancers and for me. And I feel that, the intensity of their dancing has just been so, they're really understanding more about what is being asked of them or what they can generate for the camera's eye. It's a whole different thing. It's really, I don't know if it's going to be a success, but it's been an engaging process. We're just finding our fluency in it right now. I'm really kind of thrilled with what's been captured on camera. It's required a certain kind of letting go, a certain letting go of the expectation of what live performance has been, and a redirecting. And that's been has asked us all to be very much more alert about the whole business of art making. It's been fun. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback off of Diane to say that the collaboration with the designers like Becky, and especially the person who's doing the filming, and now that I'm collaborating, Jamie Lyons, with the filming, really that's one of the most interesting conversations, like how they see things through the camera. And it's just interesting, somebody who's used to looking through the frame in that way. That's just been a very interesting conversation to me as well. It's inspiring. Katie.
Perhaps that's a good jumping off point for our next question. I'm wondering if we can talk about how design has been incorporated into our processes more broadly. Maybe Becky, would you talk to us a little bit about the costuming process from your end?
I think one of the most important things for me was figuring out how to meet the moment and contrast the moment with design for these pieces. Design had to be fairly simple. We're working with some crazy logistics. Some students are across the country. Some students are on campus. So making sure that they can get the clothes they need is really important. But just taking it beyond what clothes can be, meeting the moment, finding chaos, finding some of those ways that our world is right now in design was cool. But also finding contrast, finding joy, finding tranquility in design was a really fun investigation with these pieces. And also just meeting the pieces where they are, and finding contrast between the pieces and showing the choreographer's vision was an exciting thing.
If I might make a comment to add on to what Becky has discussed, I just wanted to say that what has been really joyful for me is to enjoy the kind of decisiveness and free flow conversations that we've had in costuming, and also in with Becky, and also with the filming techniques and kind of mentoring from Tanya London, our director of photography, that have been a way of guiding our, finding some aesthetic coherence together with each other. And that level of collaboration, and in fact, a kind of conspiratorial attitude towards it, has been really, really lively. I felt like I've gotten a lot of support for the vision of what it could be, and that it's come forward in, really quickly and directly, as a kind of process. So I'm really glad for that. It's been a pleasure for that. And to say the dancers have responded enormously to being part of that. Alita, you looked like you wanted to say something.
Yes, just that costumes are always, for me, very important in dance, but especially that this is a moving, visual, designed image. And I also began to think about painting, the medium of painting a lot. So the costumes really played a big part in how the image was constructed.
Right.
We really thought about it like evolution. So that's been really fun working with Becky on that. Very exciting. And then just going back to the idea of design in general, like, it made me realize that, I know that choreography is design, but I don't usually think of it that way. But looking at things in the aesthetic of film, you like the color of the costume and the speed of the camera and the way the person moves within the frame, all that kind of design, and the music that goes with it. All these parallel lines of design have been interesting to me. And I agree with you. It's been a real pleasure. And unbelievably, Becky works fast.
I do.
Yeah.
I would agree with what's been said. It's been a total pleasure working with Becky and the whole costuming staff. And I've just been so delighted by the designs that have emerged out of our conversations, and to see them now on camera. They are such a critical piece of the meaning-making machinery of this particular work. I know that they always are, but I just feel like they capture the essence of a vibrancy that I really wanted to make manifest in these images. And because of the way in which the costumes push up against the movement vocabulary, it brings a really important tension into the work that I think Becky just nailed, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. I think we came up with riot of color. It's really exciting.
I feel like that's accurate, Alita.
Riot of color.
Mm-hmm. If I might, one last thing that I have been interested in is that I went in thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to describe what I want, and then the filmmaker will attempt to give that to me. But in the end, what it has been is an open-ended question in which, I'm offering up from my strengths as a maker movement, as somebody or summoning that from the dancers. And then my filmmaker and editor, Heather Cooper, has been, also, filming and revealing to me what some of the potential is of the image that she's captured, or images that she has captured that offer multiple ways of putting together the pieces of this dance. We went through a major change of how to sequence the filming we started out with I thought I had a very clear idea, but then it became obvious that we needed to restructure, and that opened up many more possibilities. And I don't know about the others of you, but maybe you can say something about whether your plan going in is the same one that you're embracing now midway through, or were you surprised by the direction that things took as rehearsals unfolded?
Definitely surprised. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a structure, as I said, because of this whole idea of from bud to like blossom. And that's the only thing that we've kept. But the way that it's happened has been influenced by all the other design elements and the aesthetic eye of Jamie Lyons. And the conversation with the movement against the moving music and against the moving within the screen or not, and coming into close up or far away. There's so many. I think it's exciting. I will want to continue to do it because there's so much more to learn. And the other thing I want to say on the other side of film, I think the choreographic mind could really change and even more influence the future of film. And I mean, not even just for dance, but in general, what that the moving body and the moving camera has to offer.
Right.
I went into the process with only a very small image of what might be possible. And then I asked the dancers to film test footage every weekend. And that test footage would inform how I began the next week. And so there were always discoveries and always surprises that were born out of the footage they would capture. And so I was able to keep the process fairly organic. Yeah. But I do hope that everyone comes to see the show. I think we're all very proud. We've all learned a lot, and the students have done an extraordinary job. Yeah, please come and see Splice.
Yes, at the end of May 27th, 28th, and 29th. And it'll be streaming, although opening night will be the opening showing will be at 7 p.m. on that Thursday. And I think you will see 5 very different visions of what's possible in dance and film. It's and I think it's the beginning of dance and film, actually. I think we should do it at least once every 3 years.